viewers what it's like for you living with autism.
So I was diagnosed nearly 21 years ago as being autistic, and I was diagnosed in year 9. So that meant that I found out about my diagnosis during my teenage years as I was discovering who I was as a person. So that meant that by the end of year 12, when I was wondering what it would be like to have Asperger's, I came to the conclusion if I didn't have AS, I wouldn't be me, because AS is part of who I am. Therefore, I'm glad I have it, because I don't know life any other way.
And how would you describe it for you, what it feels like and what it's like each day from a physical and an emotional point of view for people out there who aren't autistic?
Well, as you can see, I'm wearing a cap because I also have sensory processing disorder, and there's 7 different senses, but the 2 senses I'm most sensitive to are light and sound. So I wear a cap to shield my eyes from the light if I need to. And a good example of how the light affects me was one day last year I was working in the open plan office at work, and in the afternoon I was getting a splitting headache to the point where I thought I'd have to take Panadol and go home from work and have a sleep. But instead I didn't take any painkillers or anything. I just put my cap on, and within about half an hour I had no headache at all. So as my supervisor was leaving for the day later on, I told her, oh, guess what, had a headache earlier, now I'm better. And she was amazed what an effect just wearing the cap has.
Penny, being autistic, what has been some of the biggest challenges that you've experienced in your life?
So sensory issues I've already mentioned. Another issue is anxiety and also not being able to switch off. So sometimes I'll be lying in bed at night and just overthinking and over-analysing every single goddamn thing and like stressing out of proportion, and also adjusting to change, whether that's a minor change of the flight you're on having baggage issues and you take off after you've originally scheduled to land where you're going, that was on Sunday, or change that you can see coming. Like at work last year, we had to move offices into the American consulate building, which I found very stressful just because of the way I perceived the US, because all you hear about the US in the media is guns and violence and that sort of thing. So I didn't want anything to do with US, and now I'm in a my workplace is underneath that building. So I had lots of preparation at work for that, and also gradually dealing with family stuff and adjusting to my grandma's death that recently happened.
Penny, what have been some of the positive or very wonderful experiences also that you've had?
Well, certainly.
Because you're a very smiley, happy person.
Yeah, so as I said at the beginning of my interview, I was diagnosed in year 9. As I was growing up and as a teenager, I always felt that I was a bit different, but I couldn't really pinpoint what. So then when I got my diagnosis, I understood how I was different, but then I didn't know anyone else like me. And halfway through first year uni, I finally met someone else with the Asperger's label, which is the label I was originally given. So middle of the campus centre at lunchtime, I was jumping up and down with excitement just because I'd met someone else. So after I'd done 8 years of study at uni, I had only known uni. So then before I started working, I started going to the Asperger's Victoria support groups, and it was good to meet other people. But it's also been good to meet other people, and my tribe at Autism Conference is my first one being the Victorian Autism Conference in 2014, and just meeting my tribe at other conferences since, because there's a group of us who met at VAC 2014 that then have met at other conferences since. So I like going to the autism conferences because I bump into all of that group again. And the other thing that I was quite proud of was feeling accepted for who I was as an adult, but also finally getting my promotion to lecturer at the end of 2016, because that was a 2-year process to get that to happen.
Penny, if the Prime Minister was sitting here right now, what would you say to him about how society could better understand and support autistic people?
Well, there's been a lot of stuff said in the media recently about the NDIS, and some commentary in the media has described the NDIS as a burden on the taxpayer or the health system. But I see proper support of autistics, especially as they're growing up and developing, as an investment in people's future. Because if you take the NDIS and Centrelink and all of the other supports as a whole, I feel that if kids are given the support they need as they're growing up, then hopefully they'll be developed into people who eventually will be able to contribute to society and become taxpayers, even if they need a bit of support. Just like a couple of years ago in the media, there was the example of the quadriplegic intern at Gold Coast University Hospital. He might need help getting out of bed in the morning, getting dressed, etc. But once he's in his wheelchair at the hospital, he's a phenomenal doctor. So the support he gets in his life care, or whatever you call it, that enables him to contribute to society and make a difference. So I think that if the NDIS is funded right, it will enable everyone to reach their potential, no matter what that might be.
What would you say to other autistic people?
Right, firstly, have the confidence to be yourself, and small adjustments can make a big impact, just like wearing a cap, but also find the way that the best way to communicate. So I am quite verbal. Other people communicate really well with their artwork. I know some people who communicate via augmented technology, or a talking iPad is the best way to describe it to the layperson. And even though I'm verbal, if I'm processing emotional stuff, I prefer to write it down or type it. So Facebook Messenger, which is interactive but communication via typing, is certainly my friend if I'm not coping and I'm able to still communicate.
And Penny, finally, is there anything else that you would like to say?
Yeah, I'd like to quote Professor Rita Jordan from the 2014 Victorian Autism Conference. She said in her plenary, the biggest gift that you can give to people with autism is time. And I believe that everyone has their own journey and their own timeline. So don't be afraid to do it your way in your own time, and take lots of small stepping stones to achieve your goals rather than fewer, bigger, more daunting ones. And I'd also like to thank my family, especially my late grandma, for their support, because she raised all of us up to more than we can be.